Phoenix Rising by Michael Anastas. Back in San Manuel, Meowth woke up on the beach to the pouring rain on his face and the sudden feeling that something was missing.
Where the hell did they run?
Meowth ran across the beach until he found a phone booth. He ran in, shut the door, and threw whatever change he had into the machine and dialed Giovanni's number. Giovanni awoke when his Persian brought him the phone.
Hello?
He said drowsily.
Boss, it's me, Meowth. Wait, before you hang up, there's something you should know.
This had better be important. Haven't I told you already?
Jesse and James have taken sides with Merlin Durai.
Giovanni was silent.
Can you be sure?
I'm positive. James has been trying to convince Jesse all week to join Ragnarok. You know what that means, don't you?
It means that Merlin could find out everything about me.
Right. Your full name, your location, everything you own. He could find out everything about you with the help of Jesse and James.
This is a disaster! Where are you right now?
San Manuel.
San Manuel? Then that means... Shit! They've already left! Meowth, I'll be there ASAP. Until then, do everything in your power to halt the Phoenix trainers.
He hung up the phone, turned on the lights, and flew out of bed.
This is a disaster! He said hectically at his Persian. Jesse and James sided with the Phoenix trainers. Hurry up and get my keys. There is little, if not no time to waste.
Meowth hung up the phone on the other line and smiled.
Oh, this gets better by the minute.
He rubbed his paws together, pondering the possibilities.
To hell with Jesse and James. If this works, I'll be the top cat in a wink.
Ash and Merlin stared endlessly at the abandoned refinery. It was in that time that Cassie noticed the bloodstains on their clothes.
Dear God, she shouted. You can't go in like that.
It's not our blood, said Merlin. Half of it is Mewtwo's. The other half is Gary's.
And what about the gashes on your heads? The scars on your arms? Are those Mewtwo's and Gary's?
She closed her eyes and shook her head. I'm sorry, but I think you'll need to patch those up before we go into the Hellfire. Cassie, this is... Brock stepped in front of them. Ash, Merlin, please. You are starting to get blood on the carpet, so it'd be best if we waited. He then switched into his zombie tone and faced Cassie. Of course, you already knew that, didn't you? Well, yeah, but... Then your brains match your beauty. Ash slammed his hand down on Brock's shoulder and spun him around the other way. Brock, he said harshly in his face, a word of advice. Never ask a Phoenix trainer to dance, and keep that grotesque thing in your pants. Brock just stood there, completely dumbfounded. Merlin smiled and shook his head from side to side, and Cassie covered her mouth in an attempt not to laugh. Well, all three of you are right, said Misty. I am? Asked Brock. Not you. Merlin, Cassie, and Ash. Merlin is right that we don't have a lot of time. Cassie is right that Ash and Merlin, our frontal attack, shouldn't go in when they could be bleeding to death as is. And Ash is right about Brock's either needing to control himself or be...
Don't say it!
Brock blurted out.
Don't even think about saying it!
Misty smiled innocently, and with that, we all knew what she was talking about. Darius turned back to the captain, who happened to be rolling with laughter. Do you think you could delay our departure for a few hours more? The captain stopped laughing. Well, the reason I came up in the first place was to tell you that we would be late anyway. I should have noticed, but the Melbourne took a little damage on the way in, what with your little sword fight and all. So how long will it take us now? Well, it would have been 12 hours with the main engine. Now, probably a little more than twice that. Done! Shouted Merlin as he marched past them. We'll be better by then. Over the ear-splitting roar of the helicopter blades cutting through the sky, Giovanni's voice still roared higher.
Is this the fastest this thing can go?
He shouted at the pilot.
Come on, step on it!
It's a helicopter, shouted the pilot over the roar. It's not exactly designed for speed.
Then why not take the jet? That goes pretty fast.
Because San Manuel doesn't have an airport. The closest thing to one is the landing pad on the harbor. What in God's name could be this important anyway?
The entire company!
Huh?
You heard me! The entire company is on the line! Team Rocket took sides with Merlin when they found out the plan was to get them killed in the attack at Paradise City!
But they were killed. I know. It's hard to explain. We've got 20 minutes until we reach San Manuel. That should be enough time.
Well, that's too bad, because I'm not going to tell you.
The pilot shrugged. Whatever. Giovanni breathed deeply, looked at his watch, and took out his cell phone. His Persian looked on with curiosity as he dialed the number for the phone booth from which Meowth had called from. The dial tone sounded twice before someone picked up.
Hello? Meowth? The one and only. Good to hear from you, boss.
Save the chat. In 20 minutes, I'll be landing in the San Manuel harbor. Is the hovercraft ready?
It's almost taken care of. The boys will have it ready to go before you get here.
Good. Until then.
He snapped his phone closed, folded his hands, and prayed.
Dear God, please let this come out for the best. Amen.
He looked back up at the coming sky and realized his mistake. Ash and Merlin were the good guys.
If God answers my prayer, this is going to be hell for me.
Merlin and Ash recovered before the Melbourne was even halfway to the platform. I saw them again, fully recovered, preparing for the onslaught. Ash sat idly on his bed, polishing his new sword, while Merlin jumped to a handstand and did push-ups in that position. You guys are fast, I observed, as Ash ran the cloth down the golden edge of his sword. Weren't you guys bleeding to death the last time we saw you? Merlin looked up at me, still holding himself on his hands. I've had worse. He continued with his push-ups. We've all been through worse. What does that have to do with it? That was one of the first things Merlin taught me, said Ash as he set the sword down on his bed. If you've been through a lot of the same pain, you tend to adapt to it. I turned my back on them. Whatever, you two do your thing. Just remember, we don't have Mewtwo anymore, and you know damn well that it'll take more than a month or two for her to come back on her own. I shut the door behind me. Faith was waiting outside the doorway. She had a sullen expression on her face, almost like she knew they had rushed into recovery. I gave her a slight nod and she rolled her eyes. He knows more about Pokemon than I do, said Faith, but he doesn't know when it's time to quit, or even wait for that matter. He's the Magi. What can you do? Faith held up her paw for a moment. Do you hear something? I remained silent, and in a moment I heard the blades thrashing through the air from above. You don't think... I began, and no sooner than those words came out of my mouth did James come running down the hall and crashed into me. It's him! He shouted. He's back! I found my glasses and put them back on. Who? Giovanni! Up on the deck, Giovanni and his men had come in by helicopter by the dozen. They hovered inches above the dock and piled out, rifles ready for whatever came out of the ship, and they knew exactly what could come out. Giovanni climbed down from the front seat of the lead helicopter and took out a megaphone.
You know who I am and why I'm here!
He shouted.
Hand over your hostages or prepare to fight!
Faith and I lifted James off the floor right before Ash and Merlin plowed through the door, which sent James back to the floor again. Hostages? Said Ash, dumbfounded. He's playing games, said James as he picked himself up off the ground again. He's done things like this before. Jessie ran up in the opposite direction, the opposite expression on her face. This is perfect, she shouted. Now we can finally try out our new motto. Merlin eyed her in disbelief. You took the free time we had to write a motto? Yeah, it's great, and you're part of it. She threw a script in Merlin's direction, which he just glanced at. Oh, what the hell, he said. It's pointless, but it could be fun.
Jesse! James! I know you're in there!
One of his men tapped him on the shoulder. Boss, are you sure this is safe?
Don't question me!
He shouted away from the megaphone.
You have 10 seconds to comply!
And it was then that Brock and Surge opened their cabin windows, stuck their bazookas out the window, and fired. 2 of the 5 helicopters overhead exploded. Debris rained down on the deck, not hitting an actual soldier as many times as it should have.
Damn it!
Giovanni shouted.
Jesse and James, if you're in there, come out, now!
You called? The rocket soldier's gaze turned to the sky. There, standing on the roof, overlooking the awaiting crowd, were Jesse and James, dressed in black outfits with yellow bolts streaking across them.
What in God's name are you pulling this time?
He demanded, voice cracking.
Didn't you figure it out when we called?
Asked Jesse.
The day you admitted that you tried to have us killed. We're through with Team Rocket. And now, let the word of the New Age be heard.
James gestured towards the sky.
Midnight thunder during... I've had enough!
Shouted Giovanni.
Kill them!
50 rifles clicked ready, and the bullets flew seconds after Jesse and James had ducked.
What are you doing?
Meowth shouted.
The plan wasn't to kill them.
You have a problem?
Meowth stepped back.
None. Carry on.